So what am I going to start with today after the jersey video? How about the low points of the Vancouver Canucks? And as promised, I have not gone easy on them because it's the Canucks. This is where Canuck fans say, you never go easy on the Canucks. And yet, while that's somewhat true, it's out there, right? He's a Canuck fan, so he's harder on the Leafs because he's a Canuck fan. He's harder on Montreal. He's a Canuck fan, so he's harder on... No, I'm pretty hard on everybody. And I would have been just... I don't know, as a teacher, if I'd gone into teaching, I don't know if I would have been popular or not. I'm thinking probably not. I would have depended on the group. So anyways, when you get into the low points with the Canucks and you get into your numbers, there's a lot more to it than the numbers. From 76-77 through 90-91, that's 15 seasons, they didn't break 500 once. It got to the point where, in 91's where I graduated high school, by the time I graduated, nobody I went to school with, we hadn't even seen, in our time in school, a 500 hockey team. So it was basically understood the Canucks were crap, and they were always going to be bad. And that was kind of an understanding. So when people talk about what's gone on recently, this is bad for Vancouver. Nah. We went through an entire era. The era of them having losing seasons graduated high school, basically. Could have. I mean, 15 years is close, right? At the very least, their losing seasons were in middle school. So, there's the Steve Moore incident, of course, with Todd Bertuzzi. And there's the incident with Moore that preceded the Bertuzzi punch, where Steve Moore injured Marcus Naslund, and the Canucks get mad over that. And then Naslund was an elite athlete that seemed to lose something, and it felt like it was attached to that. Now, whether it was a coincidence or not, I always felt like something happened to his shot after that incident where, it was a shoulder thing, and I don't know. But to me, it seemed like after that and before that, there were two different careers. Bertuzzi was already having kind of a poor statistical year before the Steve Moore incident as well. So, felt like he was already frustrated about all kinds of other things, including probably 2003 when they choked. 2003 against the Minnesota Wild, they were up 3-1 and then got destroyed in 5, 6, and 7. Now, of course, there's 94 in 2011 because they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. They make it to Game 7. And then, of course, they lose in both cases. And in both cases, the cities are rioting in. Which, of course, it's one of those trends that apparently started in 94 and 2011. And so, for Vancouver, those are definitely lows. Then you've got the Lidstrom goal. We all remember the Nick Lidstrom goal from basically center ice against Dan Cloutier. It's where they lose that series against Detroit. Everything else is just, that was the turning point where it's like, and done. Keenan. Mike Keenan has shown up on the board more than once. Here he is again. And Mark Messier, who, of course, came in with Keenan. It was almost as if the Rangers beat Vancouver in 94 and went, that's not enough. We need to salt the earth. Let's send Messier and Keenan out there and we'll just finish them off once and for all. And it took years for Vancouver to get over the damage that was done during that time. And then drafting. At some point in time, I'm going to put together a video, and I don't know whether to do it as sort of a power rankings or how to do it, but draft mistakes, where you'll look at the first round of the draft and you'll go, who is that and why did they draft him? And very often it feels like the Canucks are in the who is that category with guys who don't make the NHL or guys that they drafted ahead of superstars that probably would have made pretty good players for Vancouver, and it just they didn't draft them. And of course, there's the Neely trade I don't have up there. There's the treatment that Bure got as Bure left, and that's where we get to the lost assets. Cam Neely, there wasn't a whole lot of patience with Neely, and I don't know how much of a chance he was given either. That's definitely been thrown out there at the Canucks too by fans, where they don't feel like certain players get a fair break with Vancouver. So yeah, Pavel Bure, Cam Neely, Cliff Ronning to me is a lost asset because he walked as a UFA. All he wanted was $1 million contract, and Brian Burke said he wasn't worth $1 million. And then on July 1st, Arizona went, yeah, he is. They were Phoenix at the time, but I'll say Arizona. Michael Grabner, lost asset there. And he looked decent in a call-up for Vancouver before they traded him to Florida, but then Florida waived him. So there were some discussions about his work ethic, but the goal scoring would have been nice for Vancouver while he was goal scoring elsewhere. The Canucks were having trouble scoring goals. Marty Jelena, they didn't manage his exit very well. They didn't manage Jeff Courtnall's exit very well either. These are all guys who were still playing pretty darn well and just gone. Igor Larionov. Now, Larionov was different. Larionov wanted to stay in Vancouver, but if Vancouver had kept him, they would have owed another transfer agreement to his old friends in the Soviet Union. At this point, they were Russia, and Igor Larionov said no, or niet. So he ended up going over to Europe. He ends up going to San Jose instead, and it's too bad because Larionov, if they'd had him in 94, I think they beat the Rangers. Rick Vive. Of course, Vive was in the trade. I don't have Bill Derlego up there, but Derlego was in that trade for Tiger Williams. And then the Tiger Williams trade didn't help the Canucks either. So they didn't help themselves in the trade for Williams. They didn't help themselves in the trade of Williams out. Artur Serbe, they decided, well, we've got a bunch of not very great goaltenders, but we're going to get rid of the one that won too many games. We're going to get rid of the one that statistically was our best goaltender because he's short. That was the argument, was that Irbe was short. So, because he was short of stature, we're going to move Irbe. Great sadness for me. And then, of course, in the Cam Neely deal, there's the number 3 draft pick that became Glenn Wesley. And we got Barry Peterson, who was fine. The first couple of seasons, Peterson's production wasn't awful. But, again, when you're comparing it to Cam Neely, and then that number 3 pick becomes Glenn Wesley that you traded along with him, that's not a great trade. Short-term coach was right in the middle of some really ugly 15 losing seasons in that period. Bill LaForge, 4-14-2. I remember when LaForge was hired. I remember when LaForge was fired. And I remember when he was the number one joke go-to for non-Vancouver fans. And I don't know how fair that was to him, but it just didn't work. It just did not work. Not in the Hall of Fame. So these are players who have retired, have to be retired, who have not been put into the Hall of Fame, who are points leaders or wins leaders. So goaltender and forward. Most cases it'll be a forward. The Sedins and Luongo, of course, are recent retirees. And in the case of Luongo, I think he gets in there. The Sedins, I think they do too. So next on the list, Marcus Naslund, who I don't think gets in there. And I remember when he retired and the Canuck fans said, oh, of course he's a Hall of Famer. And I thought, no. It didn't feel like Naslund's peak lasted long enough. The West Coast Express era was a really, really solid, about a year and a half of them being one of, if not the best line in hockey. And then it just didn't work. And, coaches would try putting them together and taking them apart and putting them together again. It just never quite clicked again. And then on the wins list, Kirk McLean. Now, Kirk McLean, one of the best guys in terms of Canucks alumni, great guy. And yet, I don't see him as being a Hall of Fame player. Do I see him as the best goaltender the Canucks had? No, I would probably give that to Luongo, but I'd have McLean as a number 2 guy. So, the longest drought. You know what's unusual with this is that they had 15 losing seasons in a row, but because there were 16 out of 21 teams that made the playoffs, because they were in the same division as some really miserable Winnipeg teams and LA teams, they still made the playoffs regularly. Their longest drought, 4 seasons, has happened 3 times. And it may become 5, depending on how the record books record this play-in. So 4 years, 71 through 74, 97 through 2000, and 2016 to 2019. So if this play-in, if they lose to Minnesota, and the NHL goes, well, they didn't officially make the playoffs, that'd make it 5 years. And that'd be a new record. So if it feels like, gee, this has been a long time since we've had a playoff game in Vancouver, it has. And it's not something all that unusual for me as a fan because I saw it in 97 through 2000. If you're going to say, well, didn't you see it in 71? No, I did not. Okay, year 1 was 70-71. They went 24-46-8, 56 points. By year 11, 80-81, they went 28-32-20 with 76 points. They had 2 good years in there, with Orland Kurtenbach and Guervemont and Gary Suitcase Smith and all that other wonderful stuff. I could have way Suitcase Smith left the team as a low as well, but the team itself was in disarray. He just left. He had enough of this crap. I'm out of here. Can you imagine that happened now, players like I'm done. No, I'm going to the hotel. I don't care. You guys do whatever you want. So yeah, 76 points in year 11, and we were already into the losing streak that would go for a long, long time. And again, when they were winning, which was 75, 76, and 74, 75, I was not watching hockey at that point in my life. Their lowest points percentage is against Vegas, a .250 winning percentage. That's not great. And against Montreal, because Vegas is a small sample size, they have a .299 winning percentage. They don't play well against Montreal. It's not a thing. Goals for per game, their lowest is against Winnipeg, which includes the former Atlanta Thrashers, 2.41. They don't play well against Winnipeg either. Goals against per game, the most against Vegas, 4.5 goals a game. So Vegas enjoys playing Vancouver. And against the New York Rangers, because Vegas, again, small sample size, 3.99. So it feels like you watched a game between they and the Rangers and they allowed a bunch of goals, is because they probably did. And it feels to me like goalie of the future is a problem for Vancouver. The whole Kevin Weeks thing where he's going to be a starter and then he's gone. They had Joakim Eriksson. When Joakim Eriksson was signed, it was, this is a great one. This is an under-the-radar signing. This guy's going to be great. One game. Marty Brochu. And Martin Brochu was picked up by Brian Burke. Burke talked up how great this was going to be. Yeah, 6 games. Mike Fountain. Mike Fountain was the goalie of the future. He was going to replace Kirk McLean. He even played like Kirk McLean. I think he had 8 games in Vancouver. And Troy Gamble. Troy Gamble actually had a good little run there, and then concussion sidelined Troy Gamble. That's what happened with him, which was too bad, because Troy Gamble I liked a lot, and at some point in time I will do a video on careers that were too short about Troy Gamble. He was a decent goaltender, just could not get a break. So, lowest points per game among anybody who's played 100 or more games. And that is just something I've done for Vancouver, because it feels like goalie of the future has been a problem in Vancouver for years. So this is why when people ask me, what do you think about this new young kid, goaltender DiPietro? I'm like, man, I've seen goalie of the futures fail, so I don't want to make any assumptions. I hope he doesn't. Lowest points per game played, a minimum of 100 games played overall. So lowest points per game, Darcy Hordachuk, .054. Not really known as a point producer. Jason Strudwick, .078. I liked Strudwick, good defensive defenseman. Andrew Alberts, .097. I was more on the fence with Alberts. Tim Hunter, .102. Hunter was a good guy. And he'd be the face of your team, because that's the face you remember is Tim Hunter's. Very, very distinct face. It's a good thing he didn't have a life of crime, because he wouldn't have got away with anything. There's no way. Would have been, yeah, it was him. Are you sure? Look, dude, it's him. Steve Stais, .105. And I liked Stais as well. He went on and played well in Edmonton, and he'd been in Boston before that as well. Now, lowest save percentage among goaltenders who played a minimum of 50 games. And I don't like this one. I don't. Because Frank Caprice, I have his picture right here. Right in between the Capitals and that pennant of the Bruins. That's a Frank Caprice picture right there, which I got on eBay. His save percentage as a Canuck was .859. And he was kind of one of those goalie of the future guys as well. He played a good number of games, though. John Garrett, .864. Sorry, John, if you see this, but yeah, you're second lowest on the list. Richard Brodeur, .872. Brodeur's an interesting one. Brodeur is mostly revered among Canuck fans, but I remember in the 80s being frustrated. And I remember feeling like because of the 82 run to the Stanley Cup Finals, he got a free pass. And the most recent example I can think of that was Cam Ward in Carolina, where he had won a Stanley Cup as a rookie in 2006, and it felt like he didn't get a lot of the criticism other goaltenders might have when he had a bad game or he was having a subpar portion of the season or an entire season even because of what had been done before. And it felt kind of like Richard had that too. Kurt Ridley, .873. So those are your lowest save percentages among goaltenders who played a minimum of 50 games. And there may be some who are surprised to see Richard Brodeur with an .872 save percentage. And if you want to chalk that up and say, well, Vancouver wasn't very good and it was their defense, I agree their defense wasn't very good, but there's some debate about Brodeur and some of those seasons that were in there and whether or not he gave up halfway through the year. He's just like, I give up. And again, we can debate whether or not that was just if he was right. Now, goalie with the best name, I went with Cesar Maniago. So, Maniago played for Minnesota North Stars as well. So, he played for multiple teams I cheer for. And I figured, of all the goaltenders on the list, I'll go with Cesar Maniago. Although, Maxime Ouellet's fun. Friend of mine at work, we used to just call him Omelette. So what happened last night? Well, Omelette was in net. Oh. All right, well, okay. And then we wouldn't have to say anything else. It was easy. So there you go. The low points for the Vancouver Canucks. There have been many. I'm not going to lie and say there haven't been. This is why when people say, hey, do you think the Canucks are going to win the Cup in the next few years? I go, because in my experience, each really good feeling for the Canucks is followed by either fire or Keenan or both. So there we go. I'm hoping at some point we see a Stanley Cup for Vancouver, but I probably would not put money on that because, again, all these years of history and everything, it just sort of it builds up over time. But hey, if you're optimistic, that's excellent. That's fantastic. And I'm not going to say anything to take away from that. So best of luck. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And I will talk to you guys again soon. And as always, you guys can make your comments below. And tomorrow it's Vegas. And how am I going to come up with low points for Vegas? I can come up with low points for Vegas.